World between Morning Edition and All Things Considered, as the news and the people shaping it are changing in real time. I'm Robin Young. Follow along on Here and Now, NPR News every weekday.
Today at 2 on WJCT News 89.9.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a stunning shakeup in the 2024 presidential contest. We talked to two political analysts about President Biden's historic decision to bow out of the race and the road ahead for Democrats and Republicans. Then, our primary election coverage continues with a look at the Duval County School Board District 3 race. Incumbent candidate Cindy Pearson takes your calls and questions. Plus, we explore a renovated 1940s-era motel that has become a gathering place for beachgoers and artists. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. It's all ahead this hour after today's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Biden continues to recuperate from COVID at his Delaware home after announcing yesterday he was exiting the presidential race. He's endorsed Vice President Harris for the Democratic presidential nomination. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports Harris will hold her first event at the White House today since Biden announced he would back her.
Harris will be at the White House and will deliver remarks at an event celebrating NCAA championship teams. In a statement released Sunday, she said she intends to, quote, earn and win her party's nomination. Several members of Congress and other Democratic leaders have since come out to back the vice president. Harris spoke with Biden multiple times Sunday and also spoke with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and others. This week, Harris is slated to travel to Milwaukee and Indianapolis and attend a fundraiser in Massachusetts on Saturday. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
The vice president is continuing to win support from leading Democrats. Today, Harris received the endorsement of House Democratic Whip Katherine Clark. Kentucky Democratic Governor Andy Beshear also backed her, and so does Maryland Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin. He says Harris will draw on her expertise as California's former Attorney General.
I went to see her speak in Provincetown, Massachusetts 2 days ago. I was with her, and she just gave a spellbinding speech. She is going to release her inner prosecutor, and she's going to prosecute the case against Donald Trump.
He spoke to NPR's Morning Edition. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has named a panel of experts to conduct an independent review of security at the Pennsylvania rally where a gunman tried to assassinate former President Donald Trump. As NPR's Ryan Lucas reports, the panel includes officials from Democratic and Republican administrations.
Mayorkas named 4 members to the bipartisan panel: Janet Napolitano, who served as DHS Secretary in the Obama administration, 2 former George W. Bush administration officials, former Homeland Security Advisor Frances Townsend, and former Deputy Attorney General Mark Phillip. The 4th member is Chief David Mitchell, a former Maryland State Police Superintendent. The panel's 45-day review will examine the planning by the Secret Service and its state and local law enforcement partners ahead of former President Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. It will also look at those agencies' actions during and after the attempted assassination that day. Mayorkas says the review will make recommendations to prevent something like the shooting from ever happening again. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of congressional lawmakers will today visit the site of the attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania. Their visit is part of a separate congressional investigation into the attack that is not part of the independent investigation announced by President Biden. You're listening to NPR News.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Michelle Corum. Feeding Northeast Florida distributed 35 million pounds of food across 12 counties last year. Now it's celebrating its brand new $23 million facility that will help serve more hungry families in our region. The warehouse in Northwest Jacksonville has doubled the amount of space to store food and room for more volunteers. It opens as the need for food assistance in Northeast Florida keeps increasing. Florida's unemployment rate held steady in June for a third consecutive month. According to the jobs report released on Friday by the Florida Department of Commerce, the state's June unemployment rate was 3.3%, unchanged from April and May. Chief economist Jimmy Heckman.
We're seeing really encouraging numbers when we look at kind of the core labor force statistics of prime age workers that are participating in the labor force at near record highs.
The largest employment drop last month was in leisure and hospitality, which lost nearly 15,000 jobs, most of them hotel and food service positions. A 3.3% jobless rate means an estimated 361,000 Floridians were looking for work in June. Chance of showers and thunderstorms today at 50%. Probably after 1 o'clock, we'll see that precipitation and storms. Mostly sunny in the low 90s today. It's now 81 degrees in Jacksonville. Overnight low should be in the upper 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, Florida residents and the rest of the nation react to President Joe Biden's decision to bow out of the race. We take your calls and comments on this stunning announcement and talk to two local political experts about the road ahead. Later in the program, we continue our primary election coverage with Duval County School Board District 3 candidate Cindy Pearson. But first, a remarkable shakeup in the 2024 presidential contest Sunday afternoon, just a little over 100 days before the election. To talk about President Biden's decision and what to look for in the days and weeks ahead, we're joined by Dr. Michael Binder, political science professor at the University of North Florida and director of the school's Public Opinion Research Lab. Good morning, Dr. Binder. Dr. Binder is joining us via video link, and we may have to dial him back in just a second. We're also joined on the line by Dr. Nick Allard. He's a veteran politico and founding dean of the Jacksonville University College of Law. Good morning, Dr. Allard.
Good morning. Good morning.
So we also want to hear from you, our listeners. How do you think this is going to change the race? Will it impact how or whether you vote in November? You can reach us on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. Dr. Binder, 1:46 in the afternoon yesterday, and everything changed with a tweet from the president. He said it was in the best interest of his party and the country to step down. How surprised were you by this news? Dr. Binder, I think we still aren't having you here. Dr. Allard, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, was this a surprise to you? Were you shocked when you heard it, or was this something that you anticipated?
I think most everybody that I've spoken to was expecting it, and it became inevitable. And it took some time, but not surprising. Yeah. But it is dramatic and shocking in the sense of like a jumpstart of the party's efforts to win the nomination.
So you have a long history in politics. You spent decades in D.C. You worked on many presidential campaigns. You attended many party conventions, both parties. How do you think the party moves forward with Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee? Do you expect that is a shoo-in, or do you think that that's going to be challenged?
Well, guilty as charged in terms of that experience. But I am a law dean, and we're welcoming these new legal constitutional scholars in our third class. To answer your question, Anne, and thank you for having me, there is a process. It's very straightforward. There'll be at least two ways that the party's nominee will be formally chosen. One is if they decide to have a virtual in 2 weeks delegate vote, or at the convention. And we're taught by this that conventions really matter. I'm expecting, I'm not a betting man, but I'm expecting that they'll wait to the convention to let the support build. But, I think we've been taught in the last couple of weeks that anything can happen in this particular race, anything at all. So two formal ways. It's an open process. It may be a bit disorganized and noisy and sloppy, but that's democracy. It's the sloppiest and worst of all systems until you consider the alternative.
We're already getting some calls. Herman on the south side. Good morning, Herman. Go ahead.
Good morning, and thanks for taking my call, Ann. Good morning, gang. Going to be real quick. My headset is going out, so I'll ask my question, and hopefully you all can get it as well as do some polling on it. If Vice President Kamala Harris gets the nomination for the top job, the most powerful job, we say in America, how is she going to fare with the electric of the Jewish community, the Catholic community, the Episcopalian Lutherans, and also the Southern Baptists? Is she going to have enough juice, enough mustard to be an attraction? Will she be a turnoff? I'll listen. Thanks for what you do. Have a wonderful Monday.
Thank you, Herman. Dr. Allard, what are your thoughts? Is there any kind of religious implications in terms of her appeal across the political spectrum?
Herman, thanks for handing that extraordinarily apt and complex question. So the answer to the question is we will see, and it'll be up to her if she's chosen as she's the presumptive, it's hers not to win, she prevails. But the fact is, I think we can have good faith in the judgment and decency of the American people to make their decision in the choice that they'll have between the candidates. We have, with respect to the Jewish vote, she is married to a Jewish gentleman who will move from the second gentleman to the first gentleman if he is elected, and he'll be the first gentleman, so that'll be historic. And so, yes, we live in a very contentious, tough time, but hopefully the voters will be voting on the merits, on the issues that they care about, and they'll be judging with their eyes, their ears, and their hearts about the choice that they have and who's the best candidate. So I'm not trying to give you an evasive answer. With respect to the religious issue, I have an article that will be coming out in the Jacksonville Daily Record beginning of the month about love, and that addresses religious freedom in our country, and we have a long history, and it's embodied in the great First Amendment of religious tolerance, religious protection, and that Jefferson, for example, made it very clear in a letter supporting the Baptists of Connecticut in 1802 on January 1st, who wrote to him for help because they were concerned of the discrimination and the lack of the support of the state legislature for their inalienable rights. And Jefferson wrote to them that in the very first part of the Great Amendment, the First Amendment, designed to protect Americans from abuses of power of government, that the First Amendment created a great wall between church and state. So I think we can be very hopeful and go along for the peaceful transition of power once the American people at the ballot box have expressed their decision.
I think we do now have Dr. Michael Binder on the line. Thanks for sticking with us on those technical difficulties. And good morning. I want to ask you how you see this contest shaping up if it is in fact between Kamala Harris and the former President Donald Trump. Who do you think, what strategies are you seeing emerge already, and how do you think that that's going to shift, if at all?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on, right? One, in Trump world, they are reacting quickly to try and attack her. This is a circumstance where they were winning the race, they were well ahead, they were poised for victory, and then the entire ground under which they were working completely shifted. So if you're in Team Trump right now, this is not something that you wanted to see have happen. Conversely, if you're on the Democratic side and you were really nervous about Biden's ability to win the election, this gives you a shot of energy and a little bit of hope. But from the current vice president side, Kamala Harris, she now needs to go into, okay, I'm going to try and lock up my party support. And you're seeing that, whether it's the Clintons or even President Biden or other governors like Beshear or Whitmer come out in support of her. Now she needs to lock that up because she needs to get the nomination before we can think about a Harris versus Trump election.
To your point that there are some very prominent Democrats that have not yet formally endorsed her, Nancy Pelosi and former President Barack Obama among them. What do you think is the calculus there? Do you believe that that's because they ultimately don't have that immediate support for her, or are they trying to send a different kind of message?
Well, I think it's also true that, you might want to just take a second and exhale, right? This literally just happened less than 24 hours ago. You don't necessarily need to make the snap judgment. You don't have time to run a primary between now and the end of August. It's just not feasible. So this is going to have to be decided at the convention or leading into the convention. I think it's wise to just sit back and see how this plays out, see if there is somebody that comes out of the woodwork that maybe can garner some support and create a wave of enthusiasm. I don't know that person exists, but I can understand why Obama or Pelosi might just, wait just a day or so before everybody goes all in on Harris.
If you're just joining us.
Ann, may I jump in on that?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, first, it's a relief to have a real expert on be able to be connected. So, Professor Bender, I agree wholeheartedly. I just wanted to add two things. And I'm just astonished, actually, by the commentary that acts as if there's not enough time and, that somehow this is a deficiency. So we're living in an age of constant turnover, and look at all the rapid changes that have happened. There's 106 days to the election, and there's plenty of time to get things lined up. And the support seems to be, on an accelerated basis, falling in line. Now, with respect to the shock and surprise and trying to make chicken salad out of chicken something else, chicken poop, I think, about Obama and others, prominent Democrats, they're doing exactly, from a political point of view, the right thing, and they're stepping back, and rather than trying to impose a backroom, top-down type of election feel, they're allowing people to socialize and get their arms around the decision and for the support to build. And so I'm not at all surprised. In fact, I don't think that Obama in the primaries ever picked a choice. I could be wrong about that. Now, the Clintons have come out and supported her, but Biden and not Biden, the House leadership has held back. However, even today, very prominent House leaders, Peter Aguilar and Catherine Harris. Aguilar is the caucus chairman, and Harris is the whip, the Democratic whip. They've come out, and so and many state Democratic governors have already indicated that
Dr. Allard, I want to get to some phone calls here, and also remind people we are talking to Dr. Nick Allard. He is the founding dean of the Jacksonville University College of Law. We're also talking to political scientist Dr. Michael Binder from the University of North Florida. We're taking your calls and comments, and if you want to reach us on air, you can call 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect or reach out on social media. I want to take a call now from our friend Stanley on the north side. Good morning, Stanley. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Well, good morning, Ann. First of all, I am impressed with Biden and what he had decision he has made. Number two, I support the vice president to be president. We have enough time to work things out and to get everything in line. But Harris should be president, and then they can pick a man or a woman from the Democratic Party to get it done. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right. Appreciate you, Stanley. I also want to move to a call from Charles on the west side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning. My question is the Republicans are probably going to try to interfere somehow with the process, like the campaign funds being transferred from Joe to Kamala, and also, is there any other way they can interfere with this, with the transition or the selection? But if they do sue, I know it's a question for the courts, but do you think they'll have? Does Trump himself have to sue, or will, if anybody sues like a PAC or anything, will they have any kind of standing to sue? But with the courts packed for the Republicans the way they are, it's so up in the air.
Good question, Charles. Thanks. Dr. Binder, I want to ask you about that in terms of the money that exists in the Biden-Harris campaign fund currently and what happens to that. I know that they interviewed a FEC commissioner on NPR this morning, a Republican, a Trump appointee, suggesting that that may not just be a rubber stamp in terms of allowing her to access those funds.
I mean, my understanding is it's entirely a rubber stamp, and they've already renamed it, and they've already reached out to the campaign and indicated that they're working for Harris now. And even if that were the case, that somehow that wasn't just a rubber stamp, that money can easily be transferred to a PAC and be used for almost essentially the same things. She'll be able to raise enough money quickly. They raised a bunch of money yesterday. Money in politics has no problem getting where it needs to go. That's one thing that's abundantly obvious on both sides of the aisle. And as for kind of the Republican interference in this process, it's just a matter of, what the opposing political party will say and do on television. There's really nothing legally that prevents any of this from happening. Then the names don't have to be submitted until after the convention anyway. We are almost 4 weeks away from the Democratic convention. There's more than enough time to do this. This is not a problem, Ohio notwithstanding. This is, yes, unprecedented that it's so late in the process, but not unprecedented in the sense that for over 150 years, we did this by convention at the convention. So it's just kind of a hearkening back to the previous times in some ways.
We have a comment from Joss on Facebook saying Kamala Harris's favorability ratings are in the gutter. I doubt the Trump campaign is shaking in its boots right now. And in fact, Dr. Allard, polling does show that her, favorability ratings were prior to this decision by the president, less than 40%. Do you think that that's changing? How do you see her standing? Will it improve because of this apparent assignation of her, role in the election?
Well, the Florida Panthers came back from 3-0 to win the Stanley Cup, so I think that the American people are used to dramatic comebacks. I think all the polls can go out the window, and what counts will be the voters in the election in November, but also the polls will be completely different now. It's a completely different calculus. Now, that's not a legal view. That's a political view from an amateur, so you can take it for what it's worth. But with respect to the challenges and dismay, I think that the concern, because, in effect, Donald Trump and many of the Republicans are basically accusing the Democrats of plotting to nominate a winning candidate. And there's been some suggestion of legal challenges and, so on. But the legal challenges really would not be precedented. Trying for one party to interfere in the other party's internal selection, there's other recourse. But unless you get a judge reviewing a case who pays no attention to the facts or precedent, I don't expect those to prevail. The other mechanism, which addresses a direct concern, I hope I have time to say this, but there's a direct concern that's expressed out there about why hasn't Biden been removed before. The 25th Amendment is the amendment to do that, but it's unlikely that's available if, as people are concerned, he becomes really not fit to serve. Right now, he says he can serve, but he's not fit to run or to serve following on. But if it becomes apparent or something happens where he's not fit to serve, there is a 25th Amendment. But those who seek to suggest that Biden should leave right away should be careful what they wish for, because that would put Harris in office. If the House prevails and brings an impeachment movement, for example, that's not likely to succeed at all. But if they do, they should be careful what they wish for, because then Harris would be running as president. In my opinion, it would be an advantage for her.
Dr. Binder, I'm curious how consequential ultimately you think his COVID diagnosis was. I know that for the Democratic Party, the pressure has been building since that disastrous debate, but he was sidelined this week, unable to leave his home in Rehoboth Beach and basically unable to respond publicly to a lot of the continuing pressure. Do you think that ultimately that played a role?
I think personally it may have. It may have given him the opportunity to sit back and soberly look at where things were and the state of the race. And it gave people an opportunity to sit him down, right? Because when you're in the heat of the campaign and the heat of being president, that's a full-time job times 5, right? I mean, you're constantly on, and you might not be able to sit back and get that big view from up above, and maybe being housed away in Rehoboth may have given him that opportunity, and it certainly gave the opportunity for some people to come down and talk to him a little bit and get him on board with this process. So I certainly think it played in, although it may not be the direct factor that maybe some folks are thinking.
Before this happened, Dr. Binder, we were going to be talking to you today about Amendment 4, which is the abortion amendment in Florida, which would make abortion legal up to the point of viability instead of the 6 weeks as it is currently. How do you think that Kamala Harris's, outspoken position as a representative for the Democratic Party in favor of legalized abortion will impact Florida voters?
Well, I think it'll help the yes on 4 vote. And I also think this is something that can potentially invigorate the left on this issue. Biden he was pro-choice, but he was not nearly the outspoken advocate that Kamala Harris is. And you'll see this more and more as she begins to campaign. That'll be kind of the hallmark foundation of her campaign. So it'll bring a lot of attention to the issue. And it's an opportunity for her to really draw some contrast, particularly maybe not so much with Trump, but certainly with J.D. Vance and some of the things that he's been saying. So I think it brings the issue more to the forefront, and it brings more attention to it, not just in Florida, but across the country.
And Nick Allard, how can you describe the early shaping of a race that some are comparing to, or not comparing to, but specifically saying it would be a former prosecutor versus a convicted felon? Do you think that that's a narrative that, if she does continue as the nominee, the choice of the Democratic Party, do you think that will be a dominant narrative?
Yes, I think that will become. It's already in the Democratic ads that we've been seeing already in less than 24 hours. So I would expect that to.
Do you think that's effective? I mean, you run the JU School of Law. There's a lot of constitutional discoveries we've made in the course of this election cycle, not least the Supreme Court decision recently about presidential immunity. But how do you think that plays into appetite for that discussion amongst amongst voters?
Well, that's a very tricky question, because after some of the events, the Black Lives Matter movement and concern about police overreach and so on, Harris backed away from touting her experience as a prosecutor. But I think if you take a step back from the particular law and order amendment, a law and order issue, or the specific amendments, the larger question is it conveys to the electorate the importance of the White House, the president, having the choice over the Supreme Court nominations. And so that will be on people's minds, from all across the political spectrum, about what's at stake here is really control of the Supreme Court, which has had such an impact on constitutional law. So I think the more significant factor of her former experience as a prosecutor is her ability to prosecute the campaign. And I'm just wondering how Donald Trump will react to campaigning against a woman of color, and a former prosecutor. And, it's going to be very interesting to see whether how he's able to do that, and actually whether she's able to successfully tackle all the formidable skills that he's demonstrated in his efforts to take down a lot of very impressive other candidates who have tried to oppose him, either in his own party or President Biden.
Got an email from Tara. She says, I know this is very unlikely, but I'm curious what your guests think about the possibility of Harris choosing a moderate Republican as her VP candidate. I think Harris replacing Biden will engage the younger vote. Would a Republican vice presidential contender engage the center in a similar way? What do you think about that, Dr. Binder? Any chance of that?
Let's see, no. 0 and none is my guess for the chance of that, right? The Democratic Party is making this choice, and I think you're much more likely to see somebody far left than a Republican, although I do think that you're probably more inclined to see maybe a moderate. And, if we're thinking about who her potential VPs might be, there's talk of some folks like Shapiro of Pennsylvania or even Beshear of Kentucky, but one of the more interesting choices that I would see would be Whitmer of Michigan, where you would potentially have two women on the ballot, and you can go all in on women in 24. I think that would be a really appealing and a very interesting, if potentially, risky proposition, but it'll be an opportunity to help with Michigan, and which is a crucial swing state for Democrats.
And I want to ask you, Dr. Binder, as well about the issue of gender, because we've already seen some comments come out that relate specifically or sort of generally to the fact that she is a woman candidate for president and whether people would be receptive to that. But gender is also a very difficult issue for the former president, Donald Trump. And I wonder, politically speaking, how you think his supporters and his the party will address that issue in a way that doesn't create additional, friction for the former president.
Well, I'm not sure that Donald Trump shies away from friction. And I think a lot of the things that we might think about that are, political third rails or are detrimental to political campaigns, in a lot of ways have only strengthened his support amongst his base. Now, what that means for the swing voter in Iowa or the swing voter in Pennsylvania or Arizona, that's a different question. But I don't think his base would be impacted by much of anything that he would say or do in regards to gender and women at all. But there's certainly room in Middle America for movement here on this issue. And I certainly think, we've seen a growing gender divide in the vote, more so than ever before in a lot of places. And, it's certainly, listen, our country has a lot of problems, racism and sexism among them. But I certainly think it's an opportunity for Democrats to lean into that.
Nick Allard, I want to ask you just briefly about the down ballot races and what impact this could have on them. We'd seen some polling that people who were elected officials who were supporting Biden and who were vouching for his mental capacity were starting to see that ding their own popularity ratings or their own favorability ratings. Do you think that the fact that he's out and someone else, maybe Kamala Harris, is in, will have a beneficial effect on down ballot races for Democrats?
Yes, I do. I think the energy and interest and what is at stake is going to drive turnout. And I think this transforms in 24 hours the diminishing prospects that the House would change, that the Senate would the diminishing chance for the Democrats to take over the House, at least, and the Senate's much tougher, but it also has an impact there. So to answer your question, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I think it'll have a big impact.
Well, I know this is a topic we're going to continue to be talking about in the weeks ahead. Dr. Michael Binder, Nick Allard, thank you both so much for being on the program today and helping us sort through some of this news.
Thank you. It's a
Thanks for
privilege,
having me.
and Michael, it's a proud pleasure to be with you.
Up next, a conversation with Duval County School Board District 3 candidate Cindy Pierce. Welcome back. Today we are continuing our coverage of local elections, connecting you to the candidates. With 4 out of 7 school board seats up for grabs in Duval County, the August 20th primary will be one of the most consequential in school board history. It may also be one of the most political. And I'm joined now by Duval County School Board District 3 candidate Cindy Pearson. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning.
You can also call with questions or comments. We're at 904-549-2937. You can also send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So Cindy Pearson, District 3 includes San Marco, Lakewood, Spring Park. How do you characterize District 3? And you're an incumbent. Why do you want to continue representing it?
Sure. I love my district. I have gotten to know, so there are 22 public district-run public neighborhood and magnet schools within District 2, and then 8 or 9 charters within District 3. And it's a diverse district. I have 3 or 4, I think I have 4 dedicated magnets, elementary, middle, and high school. I have neighborhood schools. I have schools that have a majority of English language learners in them. I have schools that are ranked in the state performance-wise. So it's a really diverse district, but I love it. I have one of the largest high schools in the district. It's going between Sandalwood and Atlantic Coast to see who's the largest. So it's a really interesting district to represent. Why do I want to continue? I've really enjoyed supporting the schools. I have enjoyed getting to know more about legislative policy and how policy and laws affect what happens in the classroom. I want to continue that work. I also have built relationships with the principals and with staff in the schools, and feel like, in this case, experience and relationships matter. And I would like to continue building on the good work that we've been doing.
I'm intrigued that you say you enjoy it, because I watched some of those school board meetings, and it doesn't look like a lot of fun to be up there on the dais. It seems very often very contentious. How do you manage that, and how do you say that you enjoy that? I mean, is that part of the job that you also enjoy, or you just endure?
Well, the meetings are one part of the job, and that's the forward-facing or public-facing part. But I do a lot of work that you don't necessarily see. As far as the meetings go, I'm happy to hear from the public. We invite the public into our meetings, and I value hearing from them. I also hear from the public in terms of emails. When people ask to meet with me, I meet with them. When people leave a phone number, I call them back. So I'm interacting with constituents and members of the public all throughout the week. The meetings do get kind of long with some of the public comment, and some of the comments, especially the ones directed at us personally, are rough sometimes. But overall, that's part of hearing from the public and giving people a voice in what's happening in their school system.
We are getting some calls and comments from your constituents. Sharshan on the south side. Good morning. Go ahead, Sharshan.
Good morning. It's Sharshua. Hi, Cindy. I just first and foremost want to thank and commend you for all of your work these past 3.5, almost 4 years, and also being one of the school board members who actually does respond to all the constituents. That is very important, and we thank you on behalf of us. But when it comes to the budget and the school closures, what are your priorities? What are your top priorities?
It's a good question, and obviously there is a consolidation plan that is stemming from budget problems.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of schools potentially on the chopping block for closure, including at least 4 in your district. So how do you plan to address that? What is your response?
Sure. So we are in a situation with our budget where our expenses outweigh our revenue. And so we do need to make some decisions, and some will be tough decisions. When we had the discussion on March 11th, where there was a list that was produced that's now not a list, apparently, I was pretty angry at that meeting, actually, because I felt like we had had a third of the conversation that we needed to have, and there were names put out there that should not have been considered for consolidation or closure. So I have been asking for a rubric or some kind of baseline for how we're making the decision on how we're going to close schools. And then we line them up and we talk about mitigating factors to take schools off of that list. And that would be a starting place. So we are in the middle, near the end of a process of community engagement. We had 7 meetings, 1 in each board district. And now we have a citizen focus group panel that has met. Staff is working on a rubric, and then we'll be presenting to them on July 31st and August 1st. And then after that process, it'll come to the board and we will have our discussion.
And when you say the list that's no longer a list, what do you mean by that?
There were, in the presentation on March 11th, there were schools that were listed or named for closure. And you mentioned that there were several in my district, in District 3. The community saw that as a closure list. And so we have been working hard to let people know that nothing is final, nothing's decided. The board will be voting in the fall.
Okay. We've got a call from Yasmina in Arlington. Good morning, Yasmina. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to call in. My question is, seeing as though Cindy is looking to rerun for another term, what is her vision for DCPS?
Good question.
Thank you. Well, I mentioned the budget, I think, is one of our primary items that we have to get under control. No organization can continue with their expenses outweighing their revenue. Student achievement is the primary focus of any board or board member. It should be. And so while we've made great gains in our ELA or reading scores, the district saw an increase in every grade level this year, half in math, several good gains in social studies and in science. That work needs to continue. We need to look at our weaknesses and figure out how to support students and support staff so that we can see increases across the board and working towards our goal that the board put out in our strategic plan, which was to move from the bottom 25% to the top 25% of schools in the state of, or districts in the state of Florida.
How do you deal with state policy that has redirected funding in many cases away from traditional public schools and to options like vouchers or charter schools and the resulting funding loss? There is that deficit in large part due to this major shift in Florida policy when it comes to public education.
Well, that is true, and that policy comes from our state legislature and our governor, and so there's not a lot that I can do to change that. We definitely have a legislative agenda, and we have been working on some small changes. There was a list of deregulation bills last session. I've heard that there will be another round of deregulation bills. So through the legislative priorities, we can address the things that we can address. But when it comes to what's on the books, we deal with it. I have been a big proponent of competing for students. So when we put out our questions to the semifinalists, each board member got a question. Mine was, Florida is wide open for school choice. How are you going to compete for students? And that is something that I talk with Dr. Bernier about, that we need to figure out how to compete for students.
Dr. Bernier, the new superintendent.
The new superintendent.
Do you think that the district does a good enough job about communicating the reasons for the budget problems? Do you think that it needs to do more in terms of communicating that change, that statewide shift in the way that we approach and fund schools?
I think starting after the March 11th meeting, the district did. Before that, I don't think that the district was very clear in how the changes in legislation were affecting the district.
Okay. We've got a call from Olivia in Lakewood. Olivia, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, my question is, there's been a lot of conversation about what makes you more qualified or your opponent more qualified. Can you talk about, in addition to your role on the school board, what you have done in schools that gives you leverage or that you believe gives you leverage in the race and makes you qualified to continue to represent our district?
Thanks, Olivia. We should mention that you are facing Becky Nathanson in the August primary. We've invited her on the program, and she initially agreed, but we haven't been able to agree on a date. And in the past few weeks, I should say, we just haven't been able to reach her. So I'm not sure if she's going to be on, but tomorrow you are both scheduled for a debate at the Jesse Ball DuPont Center at 6:30 p.m. That's Tuesday, July 23rd. So with that said, how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent?
Sure. Well, I think experience matters. And I would start back with experience as a DCPS mom. I have 3 children. 2 have graduated from a DCPS high school, and my youngest is going to be a junior. They went to elementary, middle, and high school in DCPS. I engaged as a very active parent, volunteer in their schools, and so I have an experience and also a record of trying to build into neighborhood schools. The second is experience on the school board, understanding policy, understanding budget, understanding how legislation affects what happens in the classroom. But also, I set a goal of volunteering in each of the 22 schools. I've made it to about 8 to 10, I think, of them so far, but I have volunteered as a pre-K para. I have volunteered as a 9th grade ELA teacher for the first week of school when there was a shortage. I have done campus cleanups and been to SAC meetings and really engaged with my schools, so I know the district pretty well, and like I said, have relationships already.
So your opponent in this is supported by Moms for Liberty, and very recently the race has taken a pretty negative turn with some mailings that are pretty accusatory, I think, of you, and maybe making allegations that you would protest in terms of their accuracy. But how much do you see politics coming into those flyers and taking the race, perhaps its focus away from the kinds of things we've been talking about?
That's a great question. I would say that I don't think anyone likes to be misrepresented or have their positions or their work misrepresented, and especially in such a public way. Again, I can't control what anyone else does. From our end, we have tried to talk about who I am, the experience that I have, the vision that I have for Duval County Public Schools, what I think the priorities are, and then make a contrast between me and my opponent.
And I want to ask you, you formerly worked in D.C. for an organization called Campus Crusade for Christ. They have a position on LGBTQ issues that holds that same-sex attraction is contrary to God's design. Is that a belief that you also hold in terms of the community of gay and lesbian and transgendered individuals?
So along with that statement that Cru has made, I will tell you the practical experience in the local Cru ministries, college ministries, is that they are open to anyone who wants to come and join in. And so my position would fall along with, I do think that is what the Bible says. My practice as a board member is to create safe and supportive environments for all students. And so I have visited the GSA clubs at my high school and middle school that has one to find out how we can resource them. I really do want our schools to be safe and supportive for all students.
A reminder that JPEF, the Jacksonville Public Education Fund, is hosting a debate tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. It is free, and you can register on the JPEF website. Cindy Pearson.
Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
On the Independent 89.9 HD4, we've got hot new music that should be on anyone's cool summer playlist, including new tunes from indie pop mastermind Claro, the latest from Maddie Diaz, and summer jams from Baba LaRue. Tune into the Independent and discover something to love.
The Great Salt Lake is drying up and could disappear in just 5 years.
When you look at the state of saline lakes around the world, the percentage of what lakes have survived is zero. So we have a monumental task before us.
It's central to environmental and economic life in Utah, and it holds great religious significance too. Can the Great Salt Lake be saved? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
I'm Jen White.
And I'm Todd Zwillick.
All elections matter, and the stakes this year are very high.
And that's going to be our focus every Monday.
We're leaving the horse race, the polls to others. Instead, our focus will be on the stakes for you, for the country, and for our democracy.
Join us every week for our series, If You Can Keep It.
That's next time on 1A from WAMU and NPR.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Of the Motor Court Motel is long past, but those that remain are enjoying a little bit of a retro resurgence. One of those is the Hotel Palms. It's a 1940s era Atlantic Beach motel and now a boutique destination. I'm joined by its owner, Greg Schwartzberger, and its new featured artist in residence, Ben Bruff. Welcome to both of you.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, Greg, tell us a little bit about the history of Hotel Palms. This was a place that you used to drive past growing up in that area in Atlantic Beach, and it was kind of decrepit for a while.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Neptune Beach, so I've been driving past it ever since I got a license, walking and biking past it before then. Like a lot of courtyard inns and motor courts in America, they had their heyday.
Talk about it in some ways, but how difficult was it to pull off that renovation, and how would you describe its current look and appeal?
Well, thank you for the kind words. It was a challenging renovation. My wife is an interior designer, so she led the design project, and we worked with a really solid builder in town called Eastern Shores Construction, and he specializes in renovations and retrofits. The infrastructure was the main challenge. We had to update plumbing, electric, things like that, a lot of things that you spend money on that you don't see. I design it, or I would describe it as a quintessential courtyard inn. Modern amenities, a very minimalist feel. We try to make our guests feel like they live in the neighborhood when they stay with us.
And there are bikes and things that people can take and use.
Ride bikes, walk around the neighborhood. Once you park your car, because of the great commercial district, you don't need to drive anywhere. You just walk everywhere you need to go.
And Ben, one of the features of this renovated hotel is the artwork, which is really a defining characteristic. Some of it is yours, and that's why you're in town currently.
Correct. Yeah. I feel very fortunate to come here and hang out and get to enjoy the city and the beach and make some artwork. And like Greg said, it's community is really nice, and it feels like home.
Tell us about the mural that you have created there previously, and I understand you're going to update it.
Yeah, I actually just finished the update. I did one about, I don't know how long ago was that, Greg, about 5 years ago.
About 5 years ago
First
now.
time I came through, and some friends of mine I grew up with in Hawaii were playing at the hotel, the band, and I kind of did some artwork around that. And then just coming this time, we wanted to maybe upgrade it, and I just finished one yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And describe your art. We should say, for people who aren't watching this on video, you've got a lot of art on you. You've got tattoos all over.
Yeah.
What kind of artwork do you feel what is your style?
My style? Well, I'm a traditional painter. I have a studio practice, so I paint out of my studio. My style, I don't know. I feel it constantly changes because I'm always exploring and trying new things. But my themes are usually American Western, Americana, Western, some landscapes, the beach where I grew up. So it's a lot of my surroundings where I'm in. I kind of just incorporate that. Like if I'm in the mountains or if I'm at the beach or I'm on different parts of the world, I try to take a little of the history or just kind of absorb, just being in the world, absorbing all that.
And you're pretty well traveled. You did a lot of surf competition as a youth?
Yeah, I actually was, I was a paid surfer. I didn't really do the competitions. We were kind of just traveled around to show up and surf and shoot.
That's such a drag, man.
Yeah,
I'm
that
so
doesn't really
sorry.
exist anymore. So we got pretty lucky. So yeah, I got to travel a lot, and we visit museums, and I've always been a painter and artist, so I've just always did that alongside of doing that everything. So.
And tell us, Greg, why is it important to you and to your wife at this business to bring in an artistic element outside of just making it a cute boutique hotel?
It's been a passion of mine for a long time. using the hotel as a platform to showcase other people's talents, to showcase our community to them, to get to know these people and make such good friendships, and then introduce them to our friends here.
And so this event that is coming up, is this an anniversary of some kind for you, or is it just...
No anniversary. We have an artist residency program where our friends come in and they add the works they create to our Hotel Palms gallery. A lot of the art that you can get, you can buy direct from the artist. It's a very personal way to buy art from artists. It's quite uncommon and unorthodox. You can come meet Ben, you can watch him paint, you can talk to him about his process, his background, and then if you like his work, you can pick up a piece of art right there from him.
So Ben Bruff will be the artist in residence at the Hotel Palms from July 22nd to July 28th. There's also a live music night on the 27th.
Yeah, come out Saturday night anytime between 6 and 10, see Ben's body of work and see some good music by Dano Forte, Patsy's Daydream, and Seagate.
Well, Ben, Greg, thank you both so much for being here. It's nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's our program. If you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss another one. You can also find our entire archive at WJCT.org.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, answering who, what, when, where, why, and how is critical to proving the truth. More at terrellhogan.com.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Garden's new exhibition, Fabric of a Nation, American Quilt Stories, from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. On view through September 29th. Visit cummermuseum.org for more information.